What's up, ding-dongs? I did an Ironmon ability tier list. Every ability in Pokemon Fire Red, Leaf Green can be randomized and put onto your Ironmon, and each of them is either S rank or garbage rank or somewhere in between. So I went through each one of them and decided where they belong, where they fall in, and went into why I think that. So watch this video so you can figure out which abilities are worth having and which are worth abandoning. And if you disagree with any of my definitely correct, objectively correct, absolutely correct takes, let me know in the YouTube comments. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Kaizo Ironmon Kaizo Pokemon ability tier list. As you can see right here, we have all of the abilities your Pokemon can get listed in the game right here. I am going to be going through and ranking how valuable these abilities are from Omega S down to garbage. So again, this is going to be a Kaizo Ironmon Pokemon ability tier list. You have, in Kaizo Ironmon, your Pokemon can have any of the available abilities minus a few that have been excluded from this list, things like Arena Trap. Those can't happen in Kaizo Ironmon, so we're not going to talk about them. We're going to talk about everything that can happen on the Pokemon that you get and where they sit. Omega S being this ability is perfect. This is one you're going to want to see on every single Pokemon, no matter what. It's going to be valuable. Garbage being reserved almost exclusively for Truant. So Truant, for those who don't know, is an ability that makes your Pokemon essentially not move every other turn. It's garbage. Garbage day! It does not... You pretty much have to catch a new Pokemon if you see Truant. It's garbage. We'll start from the top of my list here, and we'll go through the list as it is. So first off, we've got White Smoke. Now, if I remember correctly, White Smoke is an ability that prevents other Pokemon from lowering your stats. In Kaizo Ironmon, stat lowerings against yourself are extremely detrimental in a very rare and small amount of circumstances. But at least a few times in every run, you run into situations where your abilities or your stats get lowered, especially accuracy. Getting hit by Kinesis and Sand Attack can be the difference between winning a battle going unscathed and needing to use up 3 healing items to get past the pesky Alakazam or something like that. It is beneficial for every single Pokemon, especially for physical attackers. If you have a physical attacker, White Smoke guarantees that the enemy Intimidate will never work on you. So for these reasons above, that White Smoke is applicable to every single Pokemon, and White Smoke has benefit for at least the Elite Four and the gyms. It is really beneficial to have. I'm going to throw it in the S tier because it is almost unconditionally always useful. Moving on, we've got another absolutely god tier ability coming up. It seems like the beginning of this tier list is starting a little too strong. Serene Grace. Serene Grace doubles the chance of a move's secondary effect occurring. And to give you an example of this, I'm going to show you 2 moves. So Headbutt. Headbutt offers a 30% chance of causing the target to flinch if they have not yet moved. With Serene Grace, that becomes 60. Sacred Fire offers a 50% chance to burn the enemy in addition to doing 100 damage. With Serene Grace, that becomes 100. Now, here is the thing. There are plenty of moves. There are plenty of moves out there in Kaizo Ironmon Fire Red Leaf Green that have no additional effect. Moves that have a higher rate of doing critical damage don't actually get affected by Serene Grace. So it puts it into an interesting place where it is one of the most powerful abilities you can get, but it is not powerful on its own. If it was valuable for every single Pokemon, I would put it in Omega S due to its incredible strength. And I'm going to do that. We saw Galactic Elliot conquer Kaizo Ironmon with a Kangaskhan that had high speed and Serene Grace Headbutt, and it had 90% flinches against the enemy Elite Four. That pretty much secured victory, and while, yes, it is a higher condition to make Serene Grace work, it also is so powerful that is going to bring it into Omega S. Next up, we have Shed Skin. Let's see. A 1 in 3 chance of a Pokemon curing its non-volatile status condition. If it cures a status condition, it does so before burn or poison damage is dealt. Shed Skin is kind of in the same boat as White Smoke, where it is valuable for every single Pokemon, but in a small subset of circumstances. I'm also going to put Shed Skin under the S tier because curing yourself automatically from a burn, a poison, a paralyze, curing yourself from any of those in the middle of a battle, especially if you're short on resources, could be the difference between winning and losing, especially in the Elite Four when you're like really low on items. Next one, Shell Armor. I think this one is going to be, yes, prevents all critical hit damage. Shell Armor is an indisputable Omega S. There's a reason it's banned in Kaizo or in Survival Ironmon, because Shell Armor is so absurdly strong. Shell Armor, it is useful for every single Pokemon. It belongs in Omega S. There's no question about that. Shield Dust blocks the added effects of attacks taken. If Serene Grace is the offensive powerhouse, Shield Dust is the defensive immovable wall. Shield Dust makes it so that Thunderbolt can't paralyze, Flamethrower can't burn, Ice Beam can't freeze, Body Slam can't paralyze. You know, all these added effects to these damaging moves cannot happen to you, and they will. This is another universally useful ability, and it is going to belong in the Omega S tier. Moving forward, we've got our next ability. Speed Boost is straightforward. Every turn, at the end of every turn, you get a speed boost. You get 1 additional point to your speed stage. The same as if you were using a move that boosted your speed by 1 stage, like Dragon Dance does, the best move in the game, minus the attack boost that it gives you. You get essentially a 50% scaling increase in speed. This is an interesting one because when you see speed boost in streams, the viewers typically get very, very, very excited. But I personally don't find speed boost to be that useful. Speed boost is first and foremost only useful against longer battles, right? Against most trainers who have 1 or 2, maybe 3 Pokemon, speed boost doesn't activate until after you make your first move. You know, depending on your speed stat, speed boost might not make that much of a difference. If your speed stat is really low, it's going to take too many turns to make a difference. I would no doubt every single time take any of these over speed boost, except for maybe 1 or 2 really odd scenarios. I am going to put it in a comfortable A tier, where I don't think it's a game-winning ability, but I do recognize its value on the right Pokemon. I'm going to put that in the A tier. Up next, we've got Static, very straightforward. You cannot be paralyzed. Stench is in Generation 3, it has no effect in battle. So Stench doesn't influence your run in any way, shape, or form, minus a little bit of less encounters in the forest in the early game, which if you're dying to those encounters anyway, your Pokemon probably isn't worth using. Next up, we have Synchronize. So if the opponent causes a burn, paralysis, or poisoning of a Pokemon with Synchronize, that Pokemon will receive that status condition too. If I get burned, you get burned. If I get poisoned, you get poisoned. It's only useful offensively against the Mon that hit you. Because of the Synchronize not actually contributing to your defense in any way, it's going to be sitting in the B tier right next to Static. Next up, we've got Sticky Hold. You can't take away my items. Useless. Same with Suction Cups, the Sucky Cuppies. They both hold on to your items. Both of those pretty much useless. Sturdy, it does have a very, very rare value of preventing one-hit KOs, but in Generation 3, it doesn't stop lethal damage in 1 turn. So Sturdy, very minimal application. It's going to be in the B tier. Swarm, which boosts bug-type moves when you're at 1/3 or less health. Same with Overgrow for grass moves. I'm putting both of these in the C tier. Very, very unlikely that you're going to even be able to use these effectively. And we have, Torrent is the same thing. Blaze is the same thing. They're all C tier. Next up, we have Own Tempo. It prevents confuses. Now, here's the thing. Confusion, status condition, 50% chance to damage yourself. And if you have a high physical attack stat, if you're a physical attacker in Ironmon, you are going to be basically hitting yourself for an incredible amount of damage while being confused, as well as losing your opportunity to be offensive. Own Tempo belongs in the A tier. Next up is Pickup. I'm going to be throwing Pickup into the B tier because it does require you to, it doesn't offer any in-battle advantage. It only gives you additional items out of battle. It's going to sit in the B tier. It doesn't actually help your Pokemon fight, but it does give your Pokemon resources. So we're going to put that in here. We got Plus, useless, stupid. Poison Point. This is going to sit in the B tier. Poisoning the enemy Pokemon is not that valuable in Kaizo Ironmon because you need to be killing them fast. Poison Point is a detrimental ability for the enemy to have against you, but for you to have it against the enemy, it doesn't make that big of a difference. I would honestly, I might even throw it in the C tier. And later on, we'll talk about Flame Body, and you know what? Let's talk about Flame Body now. I am going to put Flame Body at B instead of C because Poison Point, yeah, it poisons the enemy. It kills them a little faster, sure. Flame Body burns them, does the same thing, but it lowers their physical attack by 1/2. And that's the key difference here. Thick Fat halves the damage you receive from fire and ice. I'm putting this under the A tier. Absolutely massively powerful move, especially considering how many damaging fire moves there are. Fire is such a dangerous type. And this is universally useful for every Pokemon, even if you already resist those types. Resisting ice and fire to a stronger degree is just beneficial. Next up, we have Pressure. Pressure is mostly useless except for the very rare scenario where Pressure has a chance to cause your enemy to struggle sooner or make them waste their 5 PP moves sooner. For instance, Destiny Bond. Next up, we've got Rain Dish. This heals you in the rain. Again, it depends on the enemy being able to make it rain. And when it does happen, it's not going to make a massive difference. Very conditional, very rare to get it off. Now, Rock Head is very interesting because I have, in my 2,150 attempts, have never been able to successfully use Rock Head beneficially. It protects your Pokemon from recoil damage, Double Edge, Submission, Takedown. We also have Volt Tackle. 4 moves that can potentially benefit from Rock Head. Because of how rare it is for that to actually become useful, Rock Head is going to have to sit in the C tier. Rough Skin. I agree, actually. Let's do a quick adjustment here. Let's add a row below. We do need a D tier. I think I would rearrange it like this because they're all very conditional, but slightly more useful than any of these. Rough Skin, it's easier now for me to decide where to put this. If Flame Body gets to be B, Rough Skin's going to sit in the C. Yeah, it's going to deal a little bit of damage to Pokemon that hit you, but not a lot. And if you're getting hit, you're not doing well in Kaizo Ironmon. Runaway is going to sit right next to Stench, Sticky Hold, all these other moves that benefit you only until you get repels. Sandstream. What a move. What a move. Okay, now this is an interesting move because if you have this on a Pokemon who takes damage from Sandstream, that's anything that doesn't have Rock, Steel, or Ground typing, then Sandstream is garbage. But if you have this on a Steel, a Rock, or a Ground Pokemon, this is a sick move. At its best, it becomes a C. At its worst, it becomes garbage, so we're gonna put it into D. Sandveil makes almost no difference except if you're in that weather condition, and it does protect you from that weather condition, so it's gonna sit in C. Our next move, Insomnia. You cannot fall asleep. You wake up from sleep, right? It stops you for a few turns, but you wake up from it eventually, and it is more manageable than a lot of other status conditions. Next up is Intimidate, an automatic attack drop for the enemy's first Pokemon. I don't think it's that strong. Dropping the enemy's first Pokemon's attack by 1 stage, that's going to keep you in any of the meaningful battles safe from 20% of the team by just a little little bit. It's gym leaders, it's bosses, and it's Elite Four and champion and rival fights that are really the problem. The second Pokemon that comes out is the most dangerous. Intimidate's never going to touch them. I value dropping the first Pokemon's attack by one stage less than I value anything in the B tier. I'm putting Intimidate at C because it's only just a little bit better than useless to me. Next up is Keen Eye. That's not Compound Eyes. Keen Eye prevents you from losing accuracy. Keen Eye is a worse White Smoke, but it's still nice. It's not quite as good as Thick Fat or Own Tempo, but I will put Keen Eye in the B tier. Next up, we have Levitate. I'm going to have a pretty strong opinion on any of the absorbing moves. Ground moves can be a little bit devastating, especially for electric types, for rock types, for steel types. So Levitate on any of those Pokemon is an S, but Levitate on other Pokemon kind of sits in more of a B. And because of that, I'm gonna give Levitate an A. Having complete immunity to a move typing is always beneficial. Because this is a general list, Levitate on average is an extra immunity and it sits in the A tier. Next up, we have Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod does nothing in anything other than team battles. So we're going to get rid of Lightning Rod. Next up, we have Limber. You cannot be paralyzed. I think I mixed up Static and Limber before earlier. Static paralyzes the opponent. Limber keeps you from being paralyzed. I think I made that mistake when I was talking about them. I think both are going to be about equal because the small chance of paralyzing the opponent feels about as useful as no, Static I think in that case actually drops down to C. Preventing paralysis on yourself is more useful than causing it to the enemy because they won't last very long. Anyway, we've got Liquid Ooze up next. Whenever a Pokemon uses a suck your health away kind of move, Liquid Ooze makes them drain that health instead. Very rare for this move to ever be useful, and it doesn't prevent the damage that you take. It's gonna sit in the C tier because it's just above useless, but it's very rare to activate. Not gonna ever really be much of a difference. Next up, we have Magma Armor. Magma Armor prevents you from being frozen. Now, because freeze is such a rare condition to run into, Magma Armor is not gonna hold the same kind of value to me as Water Veil would. Preventing burn and preventing poison is the most useful. The difference is there's so many less sources of freeze that Limber is going to stay a little bit higher. Next up, we've got Marvel Scale. Raise your defense when infected by poison, burn, paralysis, freeze, or sleep. Having 50% more defense when you're poisoned, guess what? You're still poisoned. All right, next up, minus. It goes right next to plus. Those two work together in the little trash bin. Then we have Natural Cure. This is unfortunately in the D tier for Kaizo Ironmon. Natural Cure, what this does is when you switch Pokemon in battle, Natural Cure will heal your status conditions. Therefore, Natural Cure is useless. Next up, Oblivious cannot be charmed. Just above useless. The charm does not come in too often. Never gonna feel as valuable as getting extra items or protecting myself from various status conditions, right? Next up, we've got a big ability, one of my favorites, Drought. Very conditional, where unlike Sandstream, Drought offers a lot, it offers no damage. So even if your Pokemon can't directly take advantage of it right away, it's not detrimental. Basically, the fire moves being stronger, water type moves being weaker, solar beam being faster, and thunder being less accurate. That is the application of Drought. This is tricky. When it works, Drought has potential to be Omega S tier, because if you are a fire Pokemon, A, you are protecting yourself from one of your weaknesses. B, you are increasing the power of your moves that already have increased power. A Drought Flamethrower gets a 50% boost in damage twice. At minimum, it's going to be taking Flamethrower from 95 power to 190 if you have Drought and Fire type. One of my Pokemon who made it into the final area of the game, the champion fight of the game, is an Alakazam with Drought and Flamethrower. The power of this combo cannot be understated, and it has the potential to land in the Omega S. It also offers the bonus of protecting you from some of your weaknesses, but it also offers the threat of enhancing some of your weaknesses as well. I consider it an A tier ability. Moving on, Early Bird. You wake up quickly from sleep. Insomnia prevents it entirely. Early Bird is a strictly worse Insomnia. We're going to put it 1 tier lower. Effect Spore. Cause poison, paralysis, or sleep. Now, because it can't cause burn, that takes away a little bit of value from it. Just because of how conditional it is, going to be able to use that to your advantage. It's going to be sitting in the C tier along with Poison Point, along with Static, and when we eventually... Well, I guess there is no physical contact sleep other than Effect Spore. So yeah, it sits with these two. Next up, we've got Flash Fire. Flash Fire, okay. Very similar to Levitate, this makes you immune from Fire-type moves. The big thing to recognize here, lot of fire moves that just deal so much damage. It is an uncontestable fact that at some point in your Kaizo Ironmon runs, you're going to be running into one of these strong fire moves. Because of that, Flash Fire gains a little bit of value above Levitate. In addition to that, Flash Fire also has the special use case of becoming Omega S tier if you are a Caesar or if you are a Fortress. This is going to go into the S tier along with Shed Skin and White Smoke. So while it and Levitate are very similar, Flash Fire, I think, is just a little bit better due to the nature of how many fire-type moves it covers and how many things it protects you from. And it boosts your damage if you're a fire-type move user. Moving on, we've got Guts. Now, Guts is the offensive version of Marvel Scale. Raises the attack by 50% when inflicted with a major condition. If you're burned, you do not suffer your usual drop in attack. Neutral attack, because burn usually cuts you in half. Guts doesn't really offer too much, as when you have one of those conditions in Kaizo Ironmon, most of the time, you're going to need to get rid of it. I'm going to say it's going to sit next to Marvel Scale in just above useless. Pure Power is going to sit in Garbage because it is illegal. Huge Power, same thing. It's not in this list, but Huge Power is effectively the same ability. Hustle is another Garbage tier move. For those of you who don't know what Hustle does, increases your attack by 50%, but decreases the accuracy of all physical moves by 20%. So you basically trade off accuracy for damage. And if there's anything we know about Kaizo Ironmon, it's that consistency is key. That attack boost is not worth the 20% miss that you're going to be receiving. Next up, Hypercutter. I believe Hypercutter prevents you from losing attack stat. Yes, it does. Okay, Hypercutter is pretty much about the same as Keen Eye. Next up, we've got Illuminate. Increase the frequency in which enemy Pokemon spawn in the grass. Not only is this this is D tier. I want to throw it in Garbage, but it doesn't actively work against you. Next up, Immunity. This is going to be a stage above the B tier that the other status prevention ones give. Being able to avoid poison guaranteed for a run. Poison is, if you get poisoned in a cave, if you get poisoned in an early stage of a battle, you get poisoned in a tower, in a dungeon, anywhere where you can't go heal very shortly after, your run is over. Poison is one of the strongest run enders, and because of that, Immunity gets to sit in the A tier. All right, Inner Focus. Inner Focus prevents your Pokemon from flinching. Flinch is only valuable if the enemy hits you before you hit it. And if you're running a slow Pokemon in Kaizo Ironmon, guess what? You're already kind of working against yourself anyway. So Inner Focus, even though on paper it feels kind of useful, I don't think it sits any higher than something like Sandstream or any of these conditional Swarm, Blaze, Torrent, all of these, right? Next up, we've got Vital Spirit. I believe that keeps you awake, prevents the use of the move Rest as well. I'm putting it right next to... Is Vital Spirit and does Insomnia do the same thing? Are they exactly the same? Yes. Yes. Then it's sitting right next to Insomnia. For all battle purposes, these are basically the same. Okay. Next up, Volt Absorb. All right, Volt Absorb. We have already established that our move resistance abilities are sitting somewhere between S and A. The question is where does Volt Absorb sit? And the answer lies right here. You've got 9 potentially harmful thunder moves. And in addition to that, 1, to 3 of them are above 100 power, 1 is 95, and a lot of them have the ability to paralyze you pretty aggressively. Volt Absorb kind of works the same way that Water Absorb does, where when it is used, it has a beneficial effect. Not just Levitate where you're not affected, but it actually heals you. Now, the Absorb type moves are interesting. Flash Fire, Water Absorb, Volt Absorb, all those things. Because, and this might be something I'll need to search for confirmation on, but from what I have heard from members of the Ironmon community is that if a Pokemon in a randomized ROM has the ability to only have one, or can only have one ability, the enemy AI, I'm not sure how the smart and dumb AI compare between each other here, but the enemy AI will know to not use those moves against you. However, them not using those moves still counts as you being immune to them. It still does protect you from them. So even in that case, it's still incredibly valuable. Because Volt Absorb protects against lightning moves which have a chance of paralyzing you in most cases and do a lot of damage on average, and if you get hit with them, you get healed, it gets to sit right up here with Flash Fire in the S tier above Levitate. Levitate being really, really good, but I think Volt Absorb and Flash Fire being a little bit more useful, especially if you are able to get this on a Gyarados. You get Volt Absorb on a Gyarados, you have an absolute god tier run. Next up, Water Absorb. We are deep in the absorbs right now, guys. Water Absorb, very, 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 very similar to Volt Absorb. And for the same logic that we just gave out, we're likely going to be throwing Water Absorb just as high. But before we do, we're going to take a look at the water moves. The big thing to consider here, guys, is that this is where it ends. Water Spout, Hydro Cannon, and Hydro Pump are 3 real big moves. Water's got a couple of real big boys and then a couple of real medium boys. I think that water is less dangerous than fire, and I think that water is maybe a little less dangerous than Volt Absorb. I think it's about as dangerous as ground, but because Water Absorb gives you the heal, I'm on the fence here. I'm on the fence here because I kind of think it belongs with Levitate. I don't think it is as useful as Flash Fire or Volt Absorb because any of the Pokemon that Water Absorb really helps out with a 4 times resistance in Gen 3 also have a 4 times weakness to grass. So it still makes those Pokemon unrunnable. Things like Golem and Rhydon. I'm trying to think of any Pokemon with a 4 times water weakness. So maybe the only one is Magcargo, who's not very runnable anyway, and Camerupt. But even so, their BSTs, their stat totals is low enough that I think Water Absorb lacks that one special case that Volt Absorb and Flash Fire have with Gyarados and Scizor, that it belongs just 1 tier lower. Okay, moving on. We've got Water Veil, prevents burns. Burn being, in my opinion, one of the most damaging abilities you can run into. This might even belong in the A tier. Preventing a burn, I think, is just as valuable as preventing a poison, if not more so in a lot of scenarios. Yeah. It's going to go 1 tier above, right next to Drought, Water Absorb, Levitate. All right, next up, Drizzle. Drizzle gets to sit in the A tier. The A tier is Drizzle because the same reasons that Drought was A tier. And on the flip side, Drizzle actually gives you 100% accuracy with your Thunder. If you're a water type Mon, this is going to be really nice for boosting your water type moves. You have the potential of having that. Where Drought gives you the chance of having the Fire Flamethrower, you have the Drizzle Bubble Beam, you have the Drizzle Water Pulse, you have the Drizzle Muddy Water, you have the Drizzle Crab Hammer, the Drizzle Water Spout. Any of those are going to be absolute powerhouses. Next up, we've got Cute Charm. Cute Charm is going to be an interesting one. This one can inflict this one's basically the poison point of being hot.
I brushed against her delicate.
But because you need the setup of being the opposite gender than the enemy for this to work, it has that extra layer of requirement for it to work, whereas poison will always work. If you have a female Pokemon, it does actually become useful somewhat often because a lot of enemy Pokemon that trainers have are male by default. I'm going to put Cute Charm into C. Damp prevents self-destruct and explosion. Very rare use case, but it could save your run. You don't necessarily want it, but you're not going to complain about having it. Arena Trap, this doesn't happen in Kaizo Ironmon, so we'll put it there. Battle Armor, the pair that goes with Shell Armor. prevents those critical hits again. Cannot understate the value of pure critical hit avoidance. Battle armor, shell armor, absolutely god tier. Soundproof. All right, soundproof. This one is another one of those ones that has a lot of interesting use. You can see soundproof prevents all sound-based moves from damaging and affecting your Pokemon. That includes, in this generation, Grass Whistle, Growl, Hyper Voice, Metal Sound, Perish Song, Roar, Screech, Sing, Snore, Supersonic, Uproar, right? This is a pretty decently sized list of moves that you completely gain immunity to, but the big key here is Perish Song. Perish Song is a guaranteed run ender if it happens at a certain point in a battle with more than 3 Pokemon. It's not quite as valuable as avoiding burns and avoiding one typing of move in general, because it doesn't have that S tier situation of, you know, you're 4 times weak to ground and you have levitate. You don't have that situation. Or you're electric type and you have levitate, so you have no weaknesses. Next up, we have Chlorophyll. I believe that is Chlorophyll increases your speed during bright sunshine. Yeah, Chlorophyll's gonna be in the D tier. It's not gonna be quite as good as Sandveil or Rain Dish. A little bit of speed in sunlight, not that valuable. All right, next up, we've got Clear Body. Prevents other Pokemon from lowering its stats. Okay, so this is the same as White Smoke. It's gonna sit right next to White Smoke in the S tier. No stat lowerings for you. Useful no matter what you are. This is a useful on every Pokemon, no matter what the situation is, type of move. Next up, we've got Cloud9. Prevents all weather effects. So it essentially stops the enemy's drought, drizzle, hail, and sandstorms. This is interesting because, yes, it does protect you from sandstorms exactly the same way as Sandveil does, minus gaining the dodge chance. But it also prevents, you know, the drought and the drizzle, which could be good or bad depending your typing. I think on average, this gives you a little bit of value from protecting you from sandstorms. So it's going to sit in the C tier, where it's not necessarily great, but it's not bad either. Next up, color change. This one is going to go into garbage. And I think that's contestable. I think people might contest that. But color change, I think, belongs in the garbage tier. It removes control from you. And there is already so much out of your control in a Kaizo Ironmon run. Smart AI opponents are going to be able to abuse your color change to not only take away your same type attack boost bonuses, but also to exploit and give you weaknesses that you didn't have. It provides no benefit, and it only throws chaos into your run. Not even D, it's not even a neutral, it's gonna sit in garbage because it's gonna take away your same type attack bonuses more than it's gonna contribute to them. Okay, next up, Compound Eyes. This is a ability I am desperate to get this ability on a high potential mon, where it increases the ability bearer's accuracy by 30%. Anything 80 or higher becomes 100% accurate. It is conditional to you having a move that is already not 100 accurate, but it just opens the door. Raising your chance to 100 could not be more valuable. I think Compound Eyes is a move that no matter what Pokemon you grab, you are beyond thrilled to see it. That 100% accuracy, exactly what we were talking about before. Color change takes things out of your control. Compound Eyes puts things in your control. When you can't miss, the knowledge you have gained through your Ironmon run tells you exactly how scenarios are going to play out without you needing to play any sort of chance or risk or game. You know, and that's the same reason with Battle Armor and Shell Armor. You cannot be hit by chaos. The same thing with Compound Eyes. You just know. And now, the most, I think, heavily debatable move, Trace. The Pokemon copies its foe's ability, and this will only be for the first Pokemon that you see in battle. Now, I think Trace can only be rated after we look at where everything else is. Trace does add chaos in the same way that color change does, but the big difference is that Trace also removes the chaos. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you are playing Ironmon to win, which of course you are, why wouldn't you be? You can go and find the ability of almost every single enemy Pokemon you're going to run into. Now, we have rated these moves on how valuable they are for ourselves to have, but we have not rated these moves on how dangerous they are for the enemy to have. Static Poison Point Effect Spore are S tier dangerous for opponents to have, especially if you are a physical attacker. Things like Water Absorb, Flash Fire, Volt Absorb, you have to test to learn that on enemies, whereas with Trace, you can gain that information about your opponents simply by looking at them, and then you gain it. The big problem with Trace is that every time you enter a meaningful battle, a battle that is a potential at ending your run, that's things like Brock, that's things like Misty, any gym leader, any of the Giovanni encounters, any of the rival encounters, you've got a 1 in 60 something shot of becoming your ability, and that's a threat. But at the same time, you trade that threat for the advantage of gaining knowledge on every single ability that a Pokemon has in the game, because you can go in every area of the game and you can run up and down and you can run into wild Pokemon and then run away and repeat and rinse and repeat. So even without ever seeing enemy trainers, you can build your plethora of information about what the enemies have. You can see who can avoid being confused. You can see who has own tempo. You can see who your fire attacks aren't going to hurt thick fat. You can see who you're going to be unable to paralyze, who has limber. You can see who has cute charm, so you know when not to use your physical contact moves. Trace's information that it gives is so valuable that I think it belongs at minimum in the S tier. I'm not going to sit here and act like Trace gives you the same advantage that Serene Grace does, but in Kaizo Ironmon, knowledge is power.
Knowing is half the battle.
The better notes you're taking, the more you understand about the run as you're advancing through it, the better you can react to situations that come up. On top of that, Trace, when you're in the early stage of the game, if you are hunting for a pivot, Trace can be the reason you know an enemy Pokemon that you can still catch has one of these Omega S tier moves and gives you a chance to play with one of those Omega S tier moves. There is a 1 in 60 something chance, I think it's about 66 or 64 abilities in Kaizo Ironmon. And that is a lot of abilities that you can get, but Truant is one of them and Hustle is another one of them. These two can both potentially backfire and end your run. And that's why Trace doesn't get to go up to Omega S. But that risk is definitely mitigated by the fact that you can also gain pure power. You can double your attack and you can gain information or any of these other abilities. And Wonder Guard is not listed strictly because you cannot find a Pokemon other than Shedinja with Wonder Guard. But Trace can trace Wonder Guard, I believe, which makes for an incredibly valuable ability to have. If you trace Wonder Guard, that's about as valuable as tracing pure power. On the bad side, you can get Truant, you can get Hustle. On the good side, you can get pure power, you can get Wonder Guard. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my Ironmon tier list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? With what areas do you disagree? I have a little bit of thoughts about it myself after going all the way through on things I might want to move around, but I'm going to trust my instinct and keep it as is. Tell me in the comments why you think I messed up and where you think we should be moving these tiers around to. Give me reasons. You know, don't just say it. Give me reasons. I don't have anything else to say for the YouTube except for, hey, like and subscribe or something. Yeah.